All right, guys, we made it, and it's because of you. So I want to thank you for everybody that went in and voted for us. We are going to be on Ultimate Adventure. And now that I know that we got to take a long trip across the country to go and do this, there's a few things that we need to fix on this thing, adjust, modify, and make a little better. So let's go over that. The first thing I want to do is replace my early leaf springs. If you remember, I just didn't add a leaf. The problem with that is my leaf springs are old and they're just wore out. And I want to put a new set in so I don't have to worry about a few things. Check this out. See the gap there between the add a leaf and the main leaf? I'm worried that I'm going to create a weak point right here and those are going to break. Another thing I got to do, by Ultimate Adventure standards, you have to have a parking brake. Now what I used for my parking brake was this. This is a wheel chock. But what I don't want to have to do is pull that out every single time I want to park. And I'm going to show you guys what we have in store to fix that. If you remember, we still got to fix this mirror. I also have a really bad problem with my driver window, and I'll show you why. And there it went. I shouldn't have done that. Now it's all messed up. I definitely want to fix that before we're going on a long road trip. I want to be able to roll up and down my window when I need to. I also want to add onto this cage. I want to make an A-pillar that comes all the way down to the floor just to make it that much more secure. In case we actually ever do roll over, I do have enough to protect us and keep us safe. I hope that I never need it, but I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we are going to be the official OnX Offroad vehicle for Ultimate Adventure 2023. Now, I can't tell you where we're going. I can't tell you what we're doing. I actually don't know what we're doing. I just know where we start. And I am going to try to get this thing as ready as I can for what we have in store. And there's a few things that I'm still not going to be able to get to that I may have to get to afterwards. But I want to make sure that we can perform the best we can for you guys and for those guys as well. I'd like to show them what we can do on a budget. We do have a few more things I want to do this as well. Plus I got a few secrets I want to show you as to why I think this thing did so well when we were off-road. You guys are gonna have to forgive me for how messy my garage is, but I just don't care right now. I got to get things done. If you guys watched the last competition video, then you heard the clicking in my truck. Now some of you guys thought it was an engine, some of you guys thought it was valve train, and none of that. It was just an exhaust leak that was gradually getting worse and worse throughout the event. And it is right here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that is a sad face crack that runs the whole length of this thing. Now this truck had 220,000 miles on it, so for an exhaust manifold to survive to 218, I feel okay about it. But I did go ahead and replace that already, so now my exhaust sounds really nice and crisp. You don't hear anything in the motor, you just hear all exhaust, so you don't hear any of that clack, 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 clack with that exhaust leak. But that was something I went ahead and changed out off camera. I didn't think it mattered too much on how to change an exhaust manifold. So one thing that both the other teams had problems with was overheating issues. Now if you guys remember, I spent the $199 on an aluminum radiator for this that came with electric fans. Because a V8 swap in these is so popular, you can do a V8 radiator pretty easily. And because this is a 350 minus 2 cylinders, the hoses and everything lined right up. So I was able to put this in. This still took some work. It took some TIG welding to make it mount, but I was able to put this in, and it kept this vehicle a lot cooler than either one of the guys I was competing against in their rigs. Now one of the things I don't like is how chintzy these fans are. These are just cheap fans. And so they're still working. They work fine, but I am going to go ahead and upgrade. Now I picked this up from Summit Racing, and if you can see, look at the size of that motor. You can feel how much heavier this fan is. This fan probably weighs more than both of those other two fans combined. And that's just because it's got a lot more motor in here, and it's going to suck a lot more air, which in turn is going to keep me a lot cooler. Now I never really got crazy hot, but I did get warm, and it was 109 degrees some of those days. It was really hot down there in Moab, and we all knew that we were going to Moab. So this is something we should have all expected to deal with, was heat issues, knowing where we were going in the heat of the summer.
See how that's only about a finger width, where that's 3 fingers width on that motor. So this thing's just that much bigger, that much more motor, and it is quite a bit heavier.
Which probably is going to tell me a couple of things. One, that the motor's probably going to last longer, and two, that it's actually going to pull a lot better and pull a lot more airflow, a lot more CFM through that radiator. This fan, though, is like $160 or something like that. It is quite a bit more. I mean, that's almost what I paid for the entire radiator. The whole radiator was $199. So to get this better radiator or get this better fan, you have to pay up for it.
So a couple of the reasons why I chose an electric fan over having a clutch fan or a flex fan is, number one, I was trying to get as much power out of this 220,000 mile motor I could. So taking away that resistance of that fan maybe gained me, I don't know, a horsepower or two. Who knows? Probably not much. Secondly, I didn't know where in Colorado we were going to be going. Just like Ultimate Adventure, we weren't told where we were going to go. So I wanted to make sure that if we were going to be trudging through deep water, I could turn these fans off. So I do have them on a relay where they run through off a temperature relay to kick on and off, but I can manually turn those fans off in case I'm going through water, and that's going to keep it from blowing water into my motor, because I'm not running a snorkel and I'm not waterproofing all this. It's a lot more work than just running a snorkel to have your engine waterproof. You end up having to silicone a bunch of stuff and other things, and I just don't want to deal with that. So with an electric fan, I can turn those off, go through the water, turn them back on when I get out.
So I'm over on this side. You can't hear any clack, 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 clack anymore because I fixed that exhaust leak. I'm just waiting for the fan to kick on now. I have it on a temp sensor of 160 degrees, so I want to make sure the fans are going to kick on, and then we'll move on to the next thing. While we're waiting for that, I'll show you one other thing I did. Because of the heat, I put the old oil cooler, I turned into a power steering cooler. So if you remember, I ran a transmission cooler that I bought, and then I changed the transmission cooler to the power steering cooler as well. So I run the power steering return line over to the radiator. It cools where the transmission cooler was, then comes over to the old oil cooler here, then goes back down into the pump. So I'm doing everything I can to keep the power steering cool as well, which is going to help it steer better in hot situations, especially with hydraulic assist. Way better. So one of the next things I have to do to this thing is put an e-brake on it. Now I don't have an actual parking brake for this thing. I have park in the automatic, and I use the stopping block to stop the tire. Unfortunately, with these 14 bolts, when you do disc brake kit, you lose the e-brake pads, you lose the e-brake cable, and all the stuff that you would use for a parking brake. Now, you can try to find a later model 14 bolt that already has disc brakes, and then you'd have that option, but I don't have that. I bought this axle used. So what I'm going to use is this kit here, and this is from Offroad Design. Now, if you guys know who Offroad Design is, they specialize in full-size trucks, in doubler cases, suspensions, and other things. Solid axle swaps is another thing they do a lot of. But this is one of their kits. This is a line lock kit that you can use as an e-brake or as a parking brake. Why I like this kit is because this doesn't require me to run a bunch of cables back here and figure out how to make all that work. I literally just got to tie this in to my master cylinder, to my rear brake, and then back to this, and we'll be good to go. Alright guys, I pulled the S10 outside so that the high side is on the back end here when I go to bleed the brakes after putting the line lock in. I did have to take a day off because if you notice I'm a little more cleaned up, it's because I went to the dentist and had to get a root canal done. So I lost a day because I wasn't able to talk. It wasn't that I wasn't working on stuff, I just got right? So anyway, let's go ahead and bleed these brakes. So let me show you what I did under the hood here. All I did was run these lines out and go into my rear brake line down here below, and then tie it in and tie it back in. So now the line comes from the master cylinder in through this soft line into the dash, and then back into the hard line that runs to the rear brakes. All right, so I got the brakes bled. My buddy Pat here showed up, helped me bleed them. And I'll show you guys how this works real quick. So you push on the brake and then you lock it in. Now that it's locked in, these two calipers are holding pressure just like if my foot was still on the brake. And now I have a parking brake. Now, if you have a problem with that bleeding off, then you have a bad brake line or you have something that's leaking. Otherwise, it's going to hold just as long as you would hold your foot on the brake any other time on the planet. So I now have a functioning parking brake, and that's one more thing knocked off the ultimate adventure list. To release the parking brake, you just turn it, and now that fluids went back into the master cylinder. Pretty simple setup by Off-Road Design. I have heard people say, well, what if your line breaks? Well, how often is your brake lines breaking? Like, I mean, if you're driving on a vehicle where you have problems with your brake lines, you probably shouldn't be driving that vehicle on the road. Next thing I need to do is leaf springs here. If you guys saw, I did the add a leaf, which worked just great for what we were doing. It raised it up just enough. It gave me just enough weight where I could just hold it, but I was still sagging in the back, and I don't like the Carolina squat pretty much at all. I don't like that at all. So I want to get this thing back up where it's supposed to be, put some leaf springs on it that are new and that are designed to handle the weight. And I chose General Spring. They make, they're heavy. They make 3 different springs for the S10. They make the ones that were on it that are a 3-pack. They're rated for 1,000 pounds. They make one that's rated for like, I think 1,300, and then one that's rated for 1,700 pounds, which is a 5-pack leaf spring, and that's what I chose is that. Knowing that I got a lot of weight and tools and everything else in the bed, I wanted to have the strongest leaf pack I could get. Plus, it's probably going to bring this thing back up at the height that needs to be. Also, when I drilled out the leaf pack for the larger center pin at Pat's, you guys said try using a cement bit. And so I grabbed a couple concrete bits, put it in my drill press, and I was able to drill them out. So I don't think it was as pretty or as nice, but it did work. So if you guys ever need to do that at home, get yourself some concrete bits and you can drill these things out. This is the exact reason why I wanted to change the leaves out. If you can see how flat this one is and how arched this one is, they're just really wore out, and I was worried about this falling apart here. You can see where it's starting to push against it there, and it's going to wear this part of my leaf spring out. And I don't want a failure on the trail. Alright, we got the leaf springs in. They are sit just a little bit higher. I'm sure they will settle some once we get on the trail and use it. But I'm much happier knowing that I have a 1,700 pound load as opposed to a 1,000 pound load on my leaf springs now. So I feel like that'll hold up to the weight a lot better, plus having the extra leaf packs. And you can see now with the load on it, my main leaf isn't trying to sit flat with these other leaves pushing against it where it's going to make a weak point here. So hopefully with this it's a lot better. Alright, if you guys remember, this was the only thing we broke on the trail, but I definitely want that passenger mirror because I use it a lot. So I have another S10 over here that I had bought a long time ago with the plans of building it, making a truggy out of it, and then just never did. Always ended up with other projects, but it has a good mirror. Also, if you see this, if you know any of my YouTube friends that are into Corvairs, then you'll know whose this belongs to, and they're going to be coming up here. We're going to try to get this thing running in the future, but for now it's just going to sit there until that person gets here. And it is a Corvair Monza. Even this new one's got pre-scratches. It's ready for action. One of the issues I have is my door. My window doesn't roll up right. The track was bad, and then it fell apart completely, so I had to hold the window up to shut it and close it. So I got a whole window seal kit that is supposed to have all the new goodies for it. If it doesn't, I'll probably pull it off that other S10 as well. Ugh. But hopefully it's supposed to have new window tracks and everything. The nice thing about these S10s is that there's a huge aftermarket for the hot rod guys, which in turn works out for me as the off-road guy, because they make all these parts for these guys to make them nice, and I just want to fix it. When you install your door frame rubber, you want to make sure that the seal part here where they connect is at the bottom, and that way you have nice sealing point all the way across the top, so if it rains it's going to drip down and it won't get inside your door. So you can see here, this thing's wore out. This is supposed to be one solid piece. This is probably where I'm getting some water in along with the door seals themselves.
You cut it a little bit.
Yeah, I gave it probably an inch extra. I'm going to try to force it down back into it. That too. I got a crack in my door. Alright, well Pat had to take off, but he did help me get these seals in, so now I have all new seals in this door and both doors, and what that's going to prevent is that from getting any worse. Now the water is just going to just run down and run right through my door. Also, it's going to keep the door from vibrating. My window is just clackety, 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 clack everywhere I was going when it was up and down. So now with everything nice and solid, there's no movement in that window, and the door shuts nice and tight. It just sounds better even when you shut the door. There is one other thing I want to show you guys. You guys actually said that you really liked that I had dual cases, and a lot of you guys noticed that my truck wasn't struggling pulling up on the hills. Now, I never actually had the second case in, not a single time, and the reason why is because I actually messed up. I used the stock shifter linkage, and it was too short. I couldn't get it all the way in. It like barely got in, but it kicked out right when I put it in. I was like, well, I just won't use it. But what was saving me on that, and here's a trick. What was saving me on that is when you're four-wheeling, you're usually on a climb. You're usually climbing stuff. And an automatic transmission, especially like this, the 700R4, does not have a seal on the back. So it actually seals at the T-case. So that back end is just this empty void. And when you get on an angle, it'll just fill up it'll take a quart and a half easy, just fill up that back end, and then you lose it at your torque converter, and that's what's making your rig stall to try to pull. It's, and that was the noise that you were hearing coming out of the other guys' rigs. Now, how I prevented that, number one, is I put an extra quart of ATF in this transmission. The other thing I did is, if you guys remember, I put that transmission cooler in here. Now, this transmission cooler that I got off of eBay took like 2 extra quarts. So I have a cooler up front, and I put it up front on the rig for a reason, so that if I'm pulled up on a hill, not only am I a little higher in fluid, but then this fluid is going to fill back into that transmission and keep it with enough fluid to keep pulling up the hills. And that's what saved this thing pulling up those hills with only one T-case. I'm not sure on the Toyota transmission if they're built the same way, but I know Rudy's transmission with that 727 is the same way. So that is why you'd hear it whine trying to pull up on those hills, because it's actually starving the torque converter as it's climbing. Either way, that's another secret for you guys. So another little secret for off-roading. And also the one downside to filling up your transmission, like that is if it gets really hot, it's going to puke it out of the vent tube. That's the other reason I did the cooler, is to keep it cool. So anytime we were driving, anytime we were four-wheeling, I was running that other fan that went to that transmission cooler separately to keep that thing cool. So I never had a single issue. It never puked any fluid, and the thing just pulled up on everything great. But that is something I need to fix, is I need to adjust that shifter linkage. And now for the real question of the day is, can I pull this shifter linkage out without having to pull my flat belly skid out? We'll find out. All right, so here's the problem. The problem I have is this isn't adjustable. So to have it in too high, it's the right length, but it wasn't pulling it all the way into for low, which means I need it just a little bit shorter so that it'll pull a little better when I get it into for low. So what I've liked to have done with this is take a piece of all thread and put it in here. Unfortunately, I didn't have the right size all thread. So because the way I wanted to do this is use a long all thread style nut, and I don't have a 3/8 all thread here, what I can use instead is this grade 5 3/8 bolt. Now it's already set up with the threads on the top, but it's not long enough to give me the adjustment that I want. So all I gotta do here is just thread it down. Now I've created my own all thread length. So I now have enough bolt to go all the way down to the end of this nut. And that's what I wanted, because I want to have this piece, I'm going to cut this to where it's this length with this nut right at the halfway mark. That way I have adjustment out and in, or whatever I want to do. I have plenty of adjustment to mess with to do it in. 7 3/4 inches. All right, so I got our pieces made. All I did is put some anti-seize on the thread. That way it won't lock up on me if I ever need to adjust it later for some reason. If I change my shifters or something else, then I can do it that way. But I also went ahead and found a 3/8 nut, because that way this has got almost no play on it, but just the tiniest little bit. And because I'm going to be yanking to shift and everything else with that nut, I can knock that nut down once I get the exact length I want, and that's just going to keep it from having any play in the threads. It has very, very small amount, but I'm just going to make sure it has no amount. Doing it this way is also going to let me get a really precise shifter linkage length. So I was 7 3/4, now I'm 7 5/8. So I'm going to try that first and see if that keeps me in too high when I want to be in too high, but also allows me to get into for low. So I just put this in an 1/8 inch shorter. Nothing moved, nothing changed. Everything went in just fine and dandy. So hopefully that 1/8 inch will give me enough to get this thing into low range. Okay, so I can make that a little shorter even, so that I can get this thing to actually stay in. See how it's popping out of low range, which means it's not engaging all the way, but I still got some room that way. So let's shorten it up another 1/8 inch. Oh yeah, that went in. I heard that. That ain't coming out. Cool. We got it. The best part about that, I literally did that with just parts I had laying around. So in theory, that cost me nothing, but I'm sure those bolts cost me something at some time. So either way, one more thing checked off the list. Also found some old scratch-off tickets in the door here when I took it apart, but unfortunately they're not winners. So one of the last things I wanted to do is just add a little bit more support to my cage. And because this thing, even though I welded plates across the base of this A-pillar going down, I wanted to go ahead and bend a piece of tube that goes down. I still want to be able to remove my dashboard. So this is what I did.
So I took tube clamps and then used my affordable bender and made my couple of bends and then came down to these plates. I have these plates sandwiched on both sides, and I got those from Barnes. And if you guys know, we've been partners with Barnes for forever. You got a 10% discount if you go on to BleepinJeep.com/member discounts. We got all kinds of discounts you can get, but that is one of them. And so you can get these plates really cheap. There's no point in making them when you can get them from them at a much better price. And they're already laser cut, so it doesn't matter if you have it turned one way or the other. They all just fit perfectly in any direction. I have a bug in my hat. One of the things I want to do is run a dash bar and then a windshield bar, but I have to figure out how to make that where it's removable. Right now, I can unbolt this plate, and take this out off of either side. I can take that out of either side, and I can still pull my dashboard out. So that's huge for me. This thing's got a good support there if you're worried about them sliding. These things clamp really, really good anyway, but this has got that bar there to keep it from sliding up. Plus, like I said, it's welded on there. It's just a secondary support is really all it is. One of the other things I want to let you guys know too is that affordable bender, if you guys remember, I did the modified one for the air over hydraulic setup from Harbor Freight. Tom, now at Affordable Bender, will sell you that actual bender if you want that width. You still have to get your own stuff and make it yourself, but if you want it, he'll sell you the whole kit with it widened out for that ram. So you guys just got to get a hold of them. I think it had put on the website. And then they still have the original pan pump jack that I made the entire Samurai cage out of. So either way, depending on, you got two options there depending on what your budget is. And now that I have my parking brake and my cage done, and I got my exhaust fixed, and I've got my leaf springs in, I got to do some stuff. I put a new wiring harness in my Ford out there. I had to put a new wiring harness in that engine bay. It was getting pretty bad. And now I'm going to change the tires out on that trailer, and then we're going to load up to go because, guys, we got to get head into Ultimate Adventure. So I'm pretty excited. I thank you guys for voting for us. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. If you like this video, check these out. Bye-bye. See you guys on Ultimate Adventure 2023.